It's great to have you here today. We're going to have a chance to talk a little bit with some of our alumni, MBDS alumni. I have the pleasure of hosting this session with our MBDS instructor, Zarek Khan, who teaches our consulting class. Also joining us today, we have Paula Pereira, who is MBDS graduate from 2020. Paula is currently at Tim Horton, and she works in the marketing and consumer insights. Madison Ochs, who graduated in the summer 2021, and who's currently at JP Morgan. And Jason Kang from Deloitte, who graduated in 2021 as well, and who is dialing in from Canada. He is now at Deloitte Canada. They will have a chance to really connect the dots for you on how their personal and professional trajectory kind of combined with MBDS, and also provide you with some insights on how to make your case in your application process, and also of their experience during those years. Not needless to say, they joined the program during either before the pandemic or right during the pandemic, and so their experience has been a lot about flexibility and a lot about the connection with the program and kind of like finding ways to navigate those challenging times. I'm moving to Zarek. I will encourage all of you to, we're going to have a conversation here, and then we're going to move to a Q&A. I encourage all of you to post your questions on the Q&A, and we can address it in a little bit. And without further ado, Zarek, feel free to jump in.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniella. And thanks to our panelists here for joining for this conversation. And thanks to you all for participating. So as Daniella said, while we're chatting, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we will start answering them in a little bit here. So first of all, it's great to see the three of you here. You all have such interesting jobs and have had interesting career paths getting there. And so really, I'm just kind of curious, first of all, like, how did you get to sort of where you're at? So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, how the MBDS program and degree fit into that, and then what you're doing now with the skills that you've learned. So Paula, maybe I'll start with you.
Always forget to unmute myself. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Paula. Like Daniella mentioned, I work for Tim Hortons USA. It is a Canadian coffee and donut brand. I'm sure Jason knows about it.
Famous in Canada, I would say,
very
right?
Famous in Canada. We are on expansion mode in the US. I actually work for Restaurant Brands International, which owns Popeyes, Burger King, and Tim Hortons, but I sit within the Tim Hortons US brand in the marketing side. I'm the category manager for US as well as consumer insights. So it is a small team, so I get to wear many hats. And yeah, it was really, MBDS was really important for me to obtain this role here, because I originally was working on like an agency side of marketing, and I knew I wanted to stay within marketing, but wanted to transition to a more strategic and research driven side and potentially go in-house with a brand. So MBDS was really pivotal for that. I chose to pursue it as a stepping stone to do this, and I was able to do it, mainly focusing my direction on really like the consumer insights, guest insights, and research classes and knowledge that I gained through the program. And yeah, I can speak more into detail of this, but I'll give a chance for everyone to kind of give their little spiel.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And this will be a little bit freewheeling. I mean, we've got sort of an agenda, some questions, but as things pop up, we can kind of dive in a little bit too. You know, I think there are a lot of students who, there are sort of different trajectories that people take, right? And one is you go to graduate school because you want to sort of totally shift into a different type of thing, right? You were working in industry and you want to go into public policy or something like that. So you get a degree to kind of reset almost. And then there are folks, and it sounds like you might fall a little bit more into this category, who are looking to sort of add and enhance, along the path that they're currently on. And so I'm curious, like, what specifically drew you to a behavioral science degree as opposed to, say, like an MBA or something that would be like a more traditional kind of marketing path?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because at the time I was kind of in between, like, should I pursue an MBA? Should I pursue behavioral science? Behavioral science was always within my interest. So I actually did my undergrad at Penn. And while I majored in communication, I did a minor in consumer psychology. So it was an area that, like, I knew I had immediate interest in kind of like specializing and pursuing. So I feel like that was like what kind of triggered it. And then I also saw the opportunity for, a lot of people in the industry following the path of like getting an MBA and moving through this traditional path. But I thought that this was a way to kind of differentiate myself from other people. And I think especially on marketing research, there's like a big opportunity to focus more on specialization than like a more generic MBA. There are strengths to this specialization. So it was really more of an exercise of like understanding where I wanted to get and what companies we're looking for, what type of profile companies we're looking for, but really trying to dig into like the skill set, as opposed to, like, I know the company hires a lot of MBAs, but I thought that from my skill set, I would be more competitive playing into like the research strength.
Yeah, I think that is a pretty clever approach to sort of differentiate yourself. And it sounds like Tim Horton agreed as well. But what was that experience like? It sounds like, it worked out for you, of course, but was it sort of, they were looking for somebody with a behavioral science background, or did you sort of fit into something and sort of explain how your degree and your experience translated well to what they were looking for?
Yeah, I think overall in the process of looking for where companies I was applying to, I definitely had to deviate from these like traditional roles. And we know that there are programs that like people go from MBAs and there's like these career tracks that they apply to in these companies. I definitely had to deviate from that and kind of look for roles and talk to a lot of people to better understand how the companies were set up and the different departments and what would make more sense for me, and then look for those specific roles. And then this role actually ended up kind of coming to me because throughout the program, I knew what I wanted. Like, I knew I wanted to narrow down into like food and beverage or CPG. I knew I wanted to do marketing and go into like consumer insights. And I was very vocal about that. And I think that actually helped me a lot because, people keep that top of mind. I know other friends of mine from my cohort did the same in different industries. And it's that thing that like you hear about an opportunity, you think of that person. So I think that was like the best thing I did. So just trying to find really like the niche and where your strengths lie in terms of what the company is looking for. But when I received like the call about the role, it was definitely something where like I didn't really know. They were looking for someone that was a completely different profile than like an MBA. And it kind of fit in as like a glove, really. Like my job is very unique because I'm in a smaller team. So I get to do like the heavy product strategy side through the category management and work with like the consumer. Like, I'm running the studies for our products. So I think that's really special. And I know that if I was in another brand within the company, I wouldn't be able to do, because it's just, they're so much bigger.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting, is that the differentiation doesn't end just with the job search, but often like it continues on into your career as well. I've definitely observed that and experienced that too. Thanks for doing a little bit of a deep dive there. Let's keep the thread of Canada stuff going, even though I know you're working on the America side of things, with Jason, Deloitte Canada. Jason, tell us a little bit about your journey.
All right, thanks, Rock, and thanks, Paula. Yeah, there's a Tim Hortons right below, down my condo across the street, and food is pretty good. But yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Jason Kane. Let me start by telling you a little bit about what I'm doing right now. So in Deloitte, Canada, currently I'm doing consulting, and my department is called Customer Strategy and Applied Design. So I'm basically doing customer strategy consulting. So customer strategy is basically about developing, understanding the user experience or the customer experience for different firms. For example, one of the projects we worked on, our client was Pratt & Whitney, and they sell private planes to the clients, not a very common commodity. But one of the projects that my colleagues worked on was to help them to streamline their basically new client onboarding processes. So basically what I do is that I use a lot of the qualitative methods like interviews and surveys and that kind of stuff to really understand the client experience and to help firms to develop new products, find ways to improve their existing products, find new potentials in the market. So I'm actually the first person hired in Deloitte, at least in my department or my group, as like a person with behavioral science background. Actually, I was brought in by I guess a coach who referred me to this position. He was doing a lot of behavioral science things on his own, but he's been doing that for many years and not exactly through, basically he was volunteering to put a behavioral science lens on all the projects they're taking on. So he worked that out over the years, kind of made a name for himself, but I'm the first person to be hired here because of my behavioral science background. So in the future, I'm still starting. I started 3 months ago, but in the future, I think a lot of the senior leaders talk to me and they hope that we can keep up the momentum and tap into more of the behavioral science space, kind of blending behavioral science with the traditional consulting. And that's actually a very interesting point, is because there's a really big difference between how behavioral science is done here in Canada compared to the US. So based on my experience in MBDS and talking to a lot of people, in this profession, in the US, behavioral science is really based on like the classic experiments, and a lot of times actually big data. I heard about a project where it's like, I think it's HBO, that they were doing a lot of big data analysis, trying to predict like what aspects of a movie and a show that people really like, and they want to combine it together into making like a movie that people will really like. Not sure how that approach will work, but that's definitely something that people are working on. Whereas in Canada, here a lot of practice focus on really the qualitative methods, through interviews and combining like, I guess, like personality assessment, that kind of stuff, and also the cognitive biases to construct like personas for clients. So that's basically my job in a nutshell. And I guess I'll move on to how I got here. So I graduated from university, studied at University of Toronto, graduated in 2019. I had a psychology background. So coming into MBDS, I guess the courses in MBDS are very familiar to me because it's all psychology stuff. What I find to be really unique in the MBDS experience is actually a class I took with Zrock, the consulting experience. And the design challenge, the capstone project, and the consulting course, I highly recommend them, because coming from a psychology background and wanting to do psychology in the industry, in applied business, not necessarily in solely research, I had the capability to do research. I know how to do, I'm familiar with them, but I don't have the industry experience. So using MBDS as a platform that gives me those experiences where I can actually work on clients, know that, oh my God, like the stuff that I learned actually can help, innovate new ways of doing business or new tools that people can use, was a really huge step up, and it really builds to my resume. And also the connections I made here. Actually, the final client that I work on my capstone project is Deloitte, and that's actually how I got my job. So I actually did not send out any, I did not do a job search. I just got referred internally, only applied to one job and I got it. I was incredibly lucky for that. But yeah, I think MBDS really helped me to, build up my resume, my connection, and also helped me to know, what consulting is like. And that's why I decided to do consulting. And yeah.
Well, I apologize to put you on the spot now after you said so many nice things about the class that you took with me, but I think that you are up for the challenge here. So I'm curious about this project that you mentioned, this sort of onboarding for like new clients for this really sort of interesting commodity. Like, what is sort of some of like the behavioral insights that you can share, like from that, and how does that compare, or really, how does it contrast with like a normal onboarding thing? Like usually you think about reduce friction because make it as easy as possible. Like, does that still hold true with like a luxury good?
So that project, I wasn't actually a part of that project. That project took place before I got here, but I went through a lot of documents because like my current manager, my current project manager was on that project, and he sent us a lot of files.
Mhm.
So for that one, I think was because Wenyu is such an old company. It's like one of the oldest like aviation aerospace companies in the US. So they're like super traditional. So everything they do used to be like, I think they were still like, it's like basically in the 1980s. How they do things in the 1980s, they probably still do things the way they are currently. So they're basically just moving things into like an online virtual, going into the 21st century experience. But going back to it, so a lot of the stuff that we're doing currently, if you look at what I do, what my colleagues do, or my title, you think that, oh my God, like behavioral science or psychology plays a huge role in it. But in fact, very few people have a psychology background. Me and my mentor and another person, we're the only 3 people in this entire group of about 80, more than 80 people actually, because we have a marketing department and a department that does, advertisements. Very few people have a psychology background. Of course, some people have a marketing background, but the way marketing do things is pretty different from psychology. For example, based on my limited knowledge of how they do things for advertisement marketing campaigns, they basically have a bunch of writers writing up many variations of, let's say, a message, and they just try it out and just see what sticks. The one that gets the highest view, highest conversion rate, whatever, that's the one they go with. And we were chatting with them, kind of selling them a proposal saying that, hey, why don't we come in here and help you figure out, which message that might have a higher probability of working before you throwing it out there. And we're still in the process of building that. But a lot of the people don't necessarily have a behavioral science background. It's more of like common sense, trial and error, and experience. So these are type of the things that once you do a bunch, you kind of get a hang of it. It's like, okay, this is going to work. If you make it too complicated for a person to register a certain thing, the person is likely not going to do it for a variety of reasons. You don't need a psychology degree to understand that. But having a psychology and behavioral science background can really help you to speed up this process of catching up. Basically, the only thing that I'm kind of struggling right now, a lot of learning to do, is because I don't have a business background. So I'm going to need to get used to the way business people deal with things, all the abbreviations, acronyms, like SOW, this and that. Like they don't call managers, they call it M, they call it consultant C, senior consultants SC. Take a lot of time to figure that out. But I feel like behavioral science psychology has given me, and this my coach and the person who referred me to this position has confirmed me as well. It's like, I've already have this advanced skill in understanding people, relating to people, knowing how I can, influence them or nudge them in a way. Once I get to figure out how to make PPTs properly and in a speedy fashion and in the aesthetically pleasing fashion, then everything will be a lot easier. And as I'm progressing through my first couple of weeks here, I'm definitely learning that. Once I figure out how to properly send email in a professional manner, and a lot of the things that we're actually doing, it comes naturally to me because I'm trained to do that.
Yeah, well, the challenge that you've identified for yourself is one that I think that any good company sort of helps you manage, but in particular in consulting, there's like almost always investment in you as a consultant to like get better on those things. But at the same time, consulting is probably the worst offender when it comes to terrible acronyms and that sort of thing. I say that as a former management consultant. So, Madison, let's chat a little bit about your path as well. So, your journey to where you are now and how the MBDS program has kind of fit into that.
Sure. So my name is Madison. I graduated, as Daniella mentioned, this past spring, summer, 2021. So I was part of the pandemic cohort. So definitely an atypical experience, but a really wonderful one nonetheless. And I ended up at the end of my job search accepting a role at JP Morgan. So I'm in the Midtown Manhattan campus. And my team works on business transformation and corporate strategy within the commercial bank, with kind of a subset of some of the commercial bank's largest clients. And a lot of what I do feels very familiar to consulting. There's also a really big element of product management, design, product development, lots of research and things like that, which was definitely the kind of role I was looking for. As far as deciding to go to MBDS and ultimately to end up in the role I'm in now, I've always been far more interested in developing a very fungible set of skills as opposed to going super deep in one content area. So my background prior to coming to MBDS was in consulting in the federal space. I worked at Booz Allen Hamilton, and I did projects on a ton of things, from the public health service and modernizing their whole organization and agency, to figuring out the firm's 10-year geographic strategy, to doing these like weirdly niche research papers about business opportunities from COVID related to like contact tracing technology. So I was kind of all over the place. But what I really liked was having the chance to tackle a problem that had a very ambiguous definition and didn't really have a clear path forward. And I knew that eventually I wanted to go to grad school, but when I was trying to narrow down what I wanted to do, MBA or master's or something like that, MBDS was really the only program I found that felt like it would allow me to really continue this kind of exploration part of my career. I have no idea when I plan on ending the exploration part of my career. It might go on kind of forever, but it was ideal because it really focuses a lot on developing a suite of skills. You can dive deep in one area if you really want to, but because of the way the program was structured, it allowed me to do a lot of self-discovery about what I was interested in doing. If you had told me I would end up at a colossal financial institution, I would have laughed you out of the room. There's no part of me that thought I'd ever end up in finance, but I really love my job. And it was entirely because of MBDS and the experiences I had both in and out of the classroom that I was able to really kind of narrow down what I was interested in terms of work. And it was something that would allow me to apply skills, let me differentiate myself as an employee, something that would involve kind of pushing against a lot of history and, like institutionalized ways of doing business. It's really cool and challenging to be working in a transformation space in an industry and at a company that is old as anything. So it's the ideal fit for me. And I think MBDS was a really big part of my realizing it. So I would say to everyone listening, I can't actually see you, but I would say to everyone listening that one of the big things I would encourage you to think about as you're applying and figuring out what your next step is going to be is to take a step back from what you feel like those milestones are supposed to be and entertain kind of an alternate route, or like what kind of toolbox kind of things can you develop and use later on to give yourself the flexibility to adjust to a pandemic, an unexpected job opportunity, something like that. Because if I had pursued the MBA route, I was also considering, I think things would have ended up very differently, maybe just as positively, but I really couldn't have imagined a scenario where I ended up in the job I'm in now and in a job that I'm so excited about this early in my career.
It's so funny. I feel almost identical about my own career. I was at Booz Allen, and that's certainly how I have thought about like making career decisions as well, is like adding tools to the toolkit and sort of like broadening, your opportunities for things that you can work on. And that your comment about sort of being an explorer, I use that in almost every like intro to behavioral science talk that I give when companies or organizations are like, how, why should I use behavioral science? And one of the reasons is like it sort of transforms your colleagues from just sort of like workers or employees into explorers. So I really like the way that you have framed that. We have a question here in the Q&A that I'm going to kind of just jump ahead and pull in because I think it's a little bit relevant to what you discussed, Madison. And I know that the crew on this call here is all sort of private sector, but it's definitely not the case that only folks that graduate go into the private sector. So in our consulting course that Jason mentioned, we have groups represented from, nonprofits, international development, government teams, small startups, big, old companies, international companies. So it's kind of a big mix of stuff because typically students are interested in lots of different things. They have lots of different backgrounds and skills that they're coming into the program with, as well as lots of different directions that they want to go in afterwards. This question is kind of related to that. And so, and maybe a little bit to your experience at Booz Allen, which even though it's private sector and consulting is primarily with the federal government. So the question is from Christine here, which is, I reckon that the program provides a deep insight into econometrics and data skills. Does it also cater to behavioral design and strategy for wicked problems? So maybe Madison, I'll point this towards you at first, but if other folks have comments they want to add as well, feel free.
Yes, I guess it would be the easiest way to answer that question. Yes, I came into the program knowing that data was probably an area I would have to begrudgingly get comfortable with, but I was always more interested in some of the strategic, design-oriented content, classes, and experiences. So that was much of what my experience was focused on, since I knew those would be roles I'd be looking at. Through a combination of, in classroom and like coursework and also external experiences. So some of the classes that I took that kind of speak to the strategy and design elements include need finding, which was really wonderful. And MBDS has a great relationship with programs throughout Penn. So you have enormous opportunities to kind of stretch beyond just the behavioral science realm to kind of build a very interdisciplinary curriculum for yourself. Need finding was wonderful. There are also design thinking classes that lots of folks take. I also took classes in a couple of other disciplines. One was about the structure of, the inherent design of and structure of power in different spaces. So sometimes that's academia, sometimes that's in supply chain management. And that was a super out there class for me. It was through the School of Social Policy, but that was incredible and a really thought-provoking way to kind of look at design from a different lens. And then, of course, all of the classes in the MBDS program, including behavioral public policy, which has mini design challenges, or at least when I took it, kind of a mini design challenge every week. So it was a crash course in putting together some interventions and doing some research and pitching, a full suite of behavioral change elements to a hypothetical client. And then outside of the classroom, I was able to do a design challenge. I did that with Ernst & Young, and that was definitely way more oriented towards design. And it was focused more on developing a financial wellness program and identifying kind of a toolkit of behavioral insights that might help companies engage employees in financial wellness. And then my capstone as well, which was completely in the other realm. I consulted for the boarding school that I went to for high school and helped them redesign their sexual assault and prevention programming for orientation, which was an area I was very attached to when I was an undergrad. And it was just an opportunity to kind of apply this new skill set to something I was really passionate about and work with a completely different client or project organization, which was wonderful. I know that there's also a lot of interest kind of more broadly in the public sector in behavioral science. I believe the Obama administration had a behavioral scientist or behavioral science team on staff. To be honest, I'm probably a bad behavioral science practitioner for not knowing if Biden has revisited that, but I know that there's openness, and Booz Allen itself is also developing kind of some behavior change pockets and teams as well. I've spoken to some people there about the exciting work that they're doing. So there's a real appetite for it everywhere, particularly with what I think you referred to as like the wicked problems. And I think people are starting to realize that behavioral science might be one of the most effective ways to actually chip away at the root cause of some of those problems, as opposed to just, upping engagement, but not really ever actually addressing the issue of why you're not reaching people, for instance.
That's a great answer and very comprehensive. Thanks for pulling on so many different examples from your experience. And yes, the social and behavioral sciences team that was started under Obama lives on as the Office of Evaluation Sciences, housed within GSA. They actually never went away. They just sort of moved over there and moved under a new identity, but still doing behavioral science interventions across the federal government. So, I asked you all to sort of talk about your journeys, and there's something that I think kind of interesting that happens when you ask people that, is that it feels very linear, and it feels like things were, almost like, of course it happened this way, but in the moment, none of us ever really know what we're doing, right? We're always trying to figure out like what the best choice is, maybe with the exception of Paula, who had a very clearly well-defined goal coming in.
Sounds like it. Sounds better than whatever.
So, I often think it's kind of helpful to try and reflect back and think, where was I at when I was making this decision in the first place? And what do I wish I had known then? Because the folks who are listening in here, that's the position that they find themselves in, right? So thinking back to when you were deciding on, going to graduate school in the first place, and you had sort of narrowed in on the MBDS program and were preparing to either apply or get started in the program. What's something that you kind of wish you had known, or advice that you would give yourself back then? And I'll start with Jason this time.
All right, that's a good question. Maybe I'll share my experience a little bit, because I definitely went through this, if I'm telling you about what I'm doing right now, the stars are aligned, the trajectory is clear, but I definitely not from my personal experience when walking down this road. So I actually chose MBDS by, in a way, accident. So I was in fourth year in my undergrad. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, because I know I didn't want to go into research, but I was trained as a research psychologist. So actually, one of my classes, when we had 20 people in the class, it was a lab course, and the professor asked us to do self-introductions. I just said hey, my name is Jason, blah 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 blah, and after I graduate, I don't really know what I want to do. Maybe I want to do something about applying psychology in business setting, but I don't know how I'm supposed to do that. And literally sitting beside me was Rob, who graduated in, I think, 2019 to 2020 session. He was like, hey man, have you heard of MBDS? And I just looked it up, and I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect thing that I was looking for. So I think a lot of the times looking back, I have a vague feeling of what I wanted to do, but oftentimes I don't necessarily know the specific know-hows of how to get there, or what are the specific steps involved to reach there. So looking back, if I had known more about behavioral science, consulting, or how much consulting really needs behavioral science, and how actually there's diverse way of applying behavioral science and psychology knowledge in industry instead of only going to academia, I think I would have still chosen the right path. I think I'm incredibly lucky in that this is the only path I probably would have chosen, given if you give me a chance to go back. But if I had known that all about these options, I'd be a lot less I guess stressed and know that this is the right way to go. And I think MBDS MBDS also gives a lot of possibility and flexibility in terms of course selection. For example, Madison talked about she took a course in public policy. I did as well. It's a different course, but there's a lot of options for you to learn a variety of different knowledges. Lets you to explore it. So I think it will be important to explore different things before you settle on it, because you don't really know what it's like until you do it. So instead of committing to yourself a job that you don't really know what it's going to be like, maybe exploring it through a course or a design challenge or a capstone project, it's a much better way to get a taste of what it's like, and whether or not you want to actually do it for a living from 9 to 5 each day, 40 hours a week for 2 years, because it doesn't look good on you to quit a job one month in, and it's incredibly stressful to go through it in a 2-3 year process. So I think knowing the more options, or telling myself going back, try to explore some of the more options here is definitely a good way forward.
That's great. Paula or Madison, anything that advice you would give to your self as you were thinking about the MBDS program?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I kind of always tell people who are looking into the program, one of the things that always attracted me is that not only the interdisciplinary nature of the program and the flexibility that allows from a curriculum perspective, but also everything there is to do and the opportunities outside of the classroom. So I think this was something that I tried to do as much as possible, but it is an exercise of constantly reminding yourself to, and it kind of piggybacks off of what Jason was saying of exploring as much as you can, but having this constant mindset of really trying to gain experiences that will put you in situations which mimic the real world. So the design challenges are a great example. They were huge for me. I'm an international student, so because of that, for a long time I had a hard, some difficulty in finding internships in the US. I had to go back to my home country in Brazil while I was an undergrad to do internships there. And just navigating that space was always really, really difficult. But I think MBDS, like the program, the way it's set up and the opportunities it provides from like the experiences outside of the classrooms, it really helps international students gain these experiences in the US with companies in the US and US clients that you wouldn't be able to do traditionally. So I think that's like a very unique aspect of the program that like attracted me as well when I was looking at it. So a great example of this is like the design challenge that we did with Ipsos, where we worked with, they were our client. And really, like, if you think about it nowadays, Ipsos is one of my vendors that I work with in research. And what I learned a lot in that experience was just this, the whole dynamic of like trying to understand everything from like an initial question that they want to answer, and how do you narrow that down and kind of like create that design around like define a better design for the study and the approach you want to take. And that's an exercise that I do on my day-to-day job all the time when someone is like, okay, we're looking to find the results of, we want to improve our espresso. So we have many ways into looking, you know, many factors, many levers we can pull. We can focus on training or product or machinery, and then try and understand like within our capabilities, which studies are we better off going with? Is it a field study? Is it a taste test? Is it, and just like moving those levers and going even more specific into like doing a monadic study or a monadic sequential study and things like that, which a lot of it I learned tools from the classes, but again, it was just really that exercise of doing it in it is I wanted to say like a fake real world, but it is a real world experience, right? Like you're dealing with like real clients. So I think those experiences are key, and always looking for those experiences, even though when you first come in, you're like trying to gather everything and it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's just like immersing yourself in as much of these as possible. Other great opportunities that come to mind are just like research. Penn has amazing research labs. If you can work as like TAs, research assistants, these are just amazing experience for you to really learn how, if this is your interest, if this is your side. Like I worked as a research assistant for a PhD student. I was able through that to run like a massive field study with her and actually do the whole like administrative side of the study, which I nowadays do at my job, but also used it for projects that we did in the classroom and outside of the classroom later on. So yeah, I think that's my main like takeaway and advice.
Yeah, I love those examples. I think of it as like, you know, like your fake real world, right? Like I think of it as like sort of real world experience with a safety net, right? And the
Exactly.
hope is that you learn this stuff, right? And then you have multiple different avenues to sort of practice real world application, where you still have like a team or colleagues that you can, you know, talk to for support. You have instructors and professors you can talk to for support. And so you get to kind of practice so that when you're moving, one, it makes you more competitive for a job, right? Because you can talk to these examples. But two, you know, when you're actually doing it for your job for real, it's like not the first time you're ever doing it, right? You kind of have already been there. And so, you sort of know what to do. Daniella, do you want to expand a little bit on the design challenge?
Yeah, I wanted to just, bring it a little bit of perspective, because we have two different cohorts here, and also looking at many of the questions that were in the Q&A, just to address some of them collectively, as we're not going to have the time to go into them individually. So a few things to consider, like the program does have an emphasis on the applications. So even though we do have a good number of the students who come into the program who are interested in the research components, and we offer to the subset of the students an opportunity to engage, as Paula mentioned, with the wealth of opportunities as a research assistant or being part of research at Penn, and even connected with MBDS and the Center for Social Norms and Behavioral Dynamics. We also welcome those who come either with professional experience or straight out of college. We are a really diverse group of students. And every year, we usually typically have a combination of straight out of undergrad, 1 to 3 to 5 years of experience. And some of them already come either with MBAs or with a more, robust professional experience. And we believe that this combination, this mix, is what makes the experience of MBDS also so special, is that there is a large diversity in terms of backgrounds, not only in psychology, economics, but also there are folks who come with really, not the typical profile of what you see in a student in a program like this, but because they are intellectually curious, because they are driven by good questions, like they like to ask the good questions, and because they are motivated to see how people behave and how they can make that transformation and improve and kind of make the best decisions or nudge into best so that people can make best decisions. This is kind of like the layout, so to speak, of our profile of our students. Also, another thing that I'm very, very proud of in being part of the MBDS team is that we cultivated and created a really large number of partnerships and connections that provide our students with an opportunity to enter in those real life experiences like Design Challenge, but also in the programming side. We have made some changes in our curriculum, which I wanted to highlight as well. So the capstone experience is sort of like replacing the old model of the capstone project, where the students were just doing it at the end of the program. We understand that the students come into this program with a lot of questions and trying to develop their own roadmap on where to apply this and what are the options. And so we developed a course that is divided in 2 semesters, where they get to understand what are the multiple applications of behavioral science in the industry, either in consulting or in the directly in the industry, in the marketing, finance, health, and also international development and research. So that gives the students a really broad sense and an engagement also opportunity and mentorship component with leaders from these areas. And that is part of our pipeline of really strong connections with the industry. And then in the spring, they come in for the Design Challenge. We go into like multiple workshops that they go and prepare them with the professional development tools that they need. And they go into that really intense, condensed model of 8 weeks where they work with clients. In addition to that, obviously, Zarak offers a consulting class that is pretty much, as much real life as it can be. And so we'd like to think that the program provides the hard skills, the experimental design, the quantitative assessments, the judgment and decision background, the public policy, that provides the students with the kind of like core of what behavioral science means, but also with an opportunity to engage with these clients, to engage with our partners, and types of activities that really provide them with an opportunity to really put them in place, use those tools, working teams, and kind of like brainstorm and create solutions. I don't know if my pitch went too long, and I want to go back into asking them because you guys had different experiences going about it, but I wanted to highlight that those changes are here to make this program even more applied and even more industry focused.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks for walking us through that. It also, I think, highlights that the program. So I've been teaching it here for going on 3 years, and every year I've observed how responsive you are to student feedback of like, we want more opportunities to, practice like real world application. And so like finding more courses or integrating that into more courses has been awesome to see. There's a couple questions in the Q&A that sort of hit on a similar theme, which is sort of like a day in the life. Like, what's it like being a student in the MBDS program? And maybe I'll open this to all 4 of you. I'll start maybe with Madison, and we'll kind of go around. So I know that, there's sort of, this has been an atypical time to be really doing anything as a human being, but certainly being a student as well. So maybe we can talk about your, a day in the life for you all, and then Danielle, it might be helpful to also hear from you kind of what you're anticipating a day in the life to look like next year. But Madison, let's start with you.
Sure. So my, I guess, day in the life, I'll spare you the details about having to move back in with my parents at the ripe old age of 25, with my two cats. But once classes started, I spent a lot of time in classes. I don't know if the schedule will change, but most of my classes actually happened once, maybe twice a week at most. So they were longer blocks of class held on Zoom. And the professors were really wonderful about incorporating a ton of group and collaborative work. I know some of that was already baked into the syllabus, but a lot of that was in reaction to, again, student feedback from previous cohorts, but also just everyone being kind of starved for social connection over the course of the pandemic. So outside of class, I would do a lot of collaboration and meetings with group members, whether it was chatting about kind of a homework assignment and strategizing how to tackle it, or working on a discrete assignment or project. I mentioned the behavioral public policy course. Those group assignments shifted every week. So I was having, 2 to 4 meetings with a new team and a new group of students every week to work on those assignments. There was a lot of strategizing about the group work, as well as just kind of spitballing ideas and talking. And that's how I would say a lot of the group assignments go in the classes. The professors are very open to people kind of playing to their strengths and leaning on the strengths of others to come up with a very unique submission, as opposed to cookie cutter, this is what I want. It's like a chemistry problem set. Like that doesn't really happen. Aside from the actual classwork and then the outside of class assignments and homework, I would also, depending on the semester and what was happening, there might be client work as well. So between the capstone, my design challenge, and then in the fall semester, I did kind of a mini design challenge through my need finding class. You would sometimes have meetings with your clients, great opportunity to kind of flex your professional skills, particularly if you haven't been in a conventional work environment before. And then the rest of the time in the fall, I had an internship with a small behavioral science consultancy called Behavioral Site. A former MBDSer actually also worked there. That was a really wonderful opportunity. And then in the spring, a lot of the extra time was professional development. And I only wish that I had been on campus to take advantage of more of it, but was able to really lean into the career services, meet with Daniella and Chris a bunch, talk to other students, network. Like it was, I think one of the things that I realized very quickly and that I would encourage everyone to keep in mind is that this is definitely a professional program, and it's intended to be very self-driven and independently motivated. You certainly have all of the support and scaffolding and structure that you could possibly need, but it's definitely your path to carve. So I would encourage everyone to kind of lean into what they would actually hope to get from the program and think really diligently about how it might help you pursue the job or the career or something that you want, as opposed to jumping in here and expecting things to go kind of like undergrad recruiting where everyone has a job by Thanksgiving. There's a lot of like personal, professional, and scholastic development that happened for me outside of the classroom as well. Just because it was a pandemic doesn't mean I wasn't busy. It was plenty of work. It's a master's degree, so I was fully prepared to be spending more than like a regular work week's hours, but flexible schedule was really awesome to meet all of the students, and everyone's super collaborative and interested in everyone else's success. So if anyone's worried about the workload or something, obviously, do some internal auditing, talk to whoever you can talk to, but know that everyone wants you to succeed. This is not a competitive environment in a way that would make it difficult for someone to find their own way to bring their flavor to the program.
Yeah, that's great. It's what I was looking for when I was going to grad school. It's like supportive, but not like overly like competitive within like my fellow classmates. Paula, what would you add to what Madison shared, sort of a day in the life?
Yeah, I think very similar experience from like dynamic with like classes and a lot of group work, but I did get a chance. I mean, I was lucky enough that I was able to do this pre-COVID, and only like my last semester was online. But when we were on campus, it was, you in a very similar manner, like you go to the classes seminars are like longer, and it's more like lecture styled. It definitely depends on the class, but typically more lecture styled. And then there's this whole like group work dynamic. That is one of the funniest things. I used to always say, like, at one point you end up working with every single person in your cohort. I think that's like so unique because we're like a small cohort yet big, and there's so much group work that you definitely go through like pretty much everyone. But yeah, and the days kind of sprinkled around those experiences of just meeting, like going. I had my research assistant job, so I would have meetings for that, but also just general meetings for other projects and classes. I am a fan of Pan. That's why I came back. So I definitely recommend, if you have the opportunity, to getting immersed into like the university and all its activities. That, yes, it's a professional program, but there's a lot of things we did, like an MBDS soccer team at one point, so that was cool. So it's like different ways to get to meet your fellow classmates. And then the other thing that I think was very unique when we were there in person is that Penn has 1,000,001 speaker events, which I'm sure that continued through COVID, but it's really in person. It's very interesting because your friends are kind of going to different ones because they have different interests. And then you kind of catch them in the hallway and they're like, oh, I'm going to the speaker event about this. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So let me join you. So there's a lot of that. I think we definitely got immersed in a lot of outside of the classroom, like speaker events, clubs are always bringing in people to talk, like industry or academia and stuff like that. So I think those were unique to my experience in person. But yeah, just immersing yourself in the university and all of that it has to offer, really, in its diversity. There's a niche and interests that appeal to everyone. So
Yeah, no, that's great. I was on campus for the first time in a while, last month, the month before, and it was just super fun, like very lively. And the students that I met with were like, it's just like a breath of fresh air being like with everybody here. Jason, any final comments or thoughts that you would add to those as well before we turn it back over to Daniella?
Similar experience, because I did everything remotely as well, actually, here in Canada. I went to campus after I graduated in August, which is a really special experience. That's why I bought so many school merch. It's like a really familiar place, but total stranger. Yeah, I'd say I think Madison and Paula has added pretty much, hit the points here. Maybe one thing is that if I do find that the coursework is really familiar to me because of my psychology background. Some of my fellow classmates who doesn't necessarily have a psychology background do struggle with certain elements of the course. For example, being able to read an academic journal in economy or academic journal at all, that does take some getting used to. So I think personal experience will really differ. For example, the course load, the workload. It's also I spent 4 years writing psychology research essays. So writing a couple more for MBDS, it's pretty straightforward for me. But for someone who's never written anything like this, it will definitely be a struggle in another language as well. So I think it's the experience will definitely differ depending on your background. So if you have a background in psychology or academic research, it will definitely be a lot easier than someone coming in with, let's say, a pure business background or some other discipline. But overall, yeah, I think the coursework, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much like undergrad, but the difference is that a little bit less tests, but a lot more group work. So you will get your project management skills up really, really quickly. You gotta tell your partners and tell your classmates, like who's in charge of what. So yeah, in addition to that, I'd say the course experience is very similar to undergrad, other than the fact that a lot of it's collaboration, but also you need to keep in mind it's a professional degree. Like Madison said, no one's going to push you to do anything. You got to do it for your own. You need to figure out, who you're going to talk to, figure out, what kind of opportunities you want to pursue. But yeah, overall, I think that's all I have to add.
Perfect. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for your thoughts this afternoon. This was great. I really enjoyed the conversation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Daniella for any closing thoughts. Danielle, feel free to weigh in on sort of what you think a day in the life might look like this coming week too, if it's going to be different. And then I'll just note that I see there are a lot of questions in the Q&A that you all have been answering this time as well. So thanks for doing that.
I was tackling some of them. And just to go over, more of the processes. The most important parts of your application will be your transcripts, your GPA, and your statement letter. We want to see that you are connecting the dots for us on why you're interested in this program, understanding that this is a professional program, that you have already familiarized yourself with the coursework and with the curriculum. How is this program in a position to help you advance your career? What are the elements that you are mostly interested or that you are particularly wanting to focus on? And really to get to know a little bit about yourself in terms of your background, connecting your background with what you want to do next. This is kind of like the most, I would say, meaningful advice that I can give to someone who is considering applying for it. Now, we do have 2 deadlines. We have a December 1st, that is a priority deadline. I encourage all of you who have your materials ready to submit it by then. And then we have the traditional deadline of February 1st for those of you who may not have all of the materials in time and who still want to submit your application. One final thought that kind of like connects the 3 panelists here. I had a chance to interact with them as they were either offboarding or onboarding. Paula was finishing when I started. I was able to onboard Jason and Madison. And as the associate director, one of my key roles is really to provide the students with the support that they need and kind of like help them get through this process and help them understand what they want and how the program can help them. I really value the advice that Madison gave and kind of understanding this program as a professional program that a lot relies on you individually and kind of like making those connections. That's why even when you're applying, we put so much emphasis on that. But by the time that you are in the program, there is so much out there and we help guide you and kind of like channel your energy and your efforts towards what you want to do and where you want to go. But it's not, the program is designed for you to give you the opportunities to explore. And so either by expanding it, like Jason said, not being like, pigeonholed into just one thing, but also in focusing on what is exactly that you're passionate about, the program is there to help you. I am incredibly proud of all of the students and alums of the program. I continue to work with them and, I invited them and I'm incredibly grateful because they are 3 examples of how successful this program has been thus far. But we have a really long list of really successful and incredible students and alumni that are part of this community. And so I welcome all of you to, put your applications on. If you have any questions using the MBDS email that was circulated, look for the resources online. We have a ton of information on our website, and we're going to offer additional sessions until the end of the applications period. And for now, I hope that you found this useful, helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Zarak. Thank you, Madison. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Jason. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day and week.
Thanks, everyone. See you in class.